That's okay. Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Roberts. Again, I am the Associate Dean of Student Affairs and Alumni Relations with the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy. And I'm pleased to welcome you all to our observance of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. A little housekeeping, if you would please and would like to, you can add your pronouns to your name as it appears. And you can do so if you aren't familiar by simply clicking on the three dots that appear in your image box in the upper right-hand corner, and then clicking rename, or you can refer to the participant list in the chat box and also click on the three dots to rename and add your pronouns should you choose to do so. And now I just wanted to ground us a little bit by giving you some history of this international observance, which was proclaimed in 1992 by the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 47-3. It aims to promote the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities in all spheres of society and development, and to increase awareness of the situation of persons with disabilities in every aspect of political, social, economic, and cultural life. Building on many decades of the United Nations work in the field of disability, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which was adopted in 2006, this day has further advanced the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and other international development frameworks. It gives me so much pleasure to introduce to you our guest speaker for our event. Catarina Rivera is a leader, a public speaker, and an entrepreneur with 13 years of experience in the public sector, both in nonprofits and in education. She currently works as a manager at a large nonprofit organization in New York City. She is also the founder of Blindish Latina, a platform increasing awareness about accessibility and sharing her experience as a disabled Latina professional. Blindish Latina has partnered with Project Hearing for a bi-weekly discussion series called Chicas Talk Disability, which has covered a wide range of topics. Catarina is also the co-founder of Explore Equity, a sustainable travel company. She holds her bachelor's in arts from Duke University, a master's in education from Bank Street College of Education, and her MPH from the CUNY School of Public Health at Hunter College. You can follow at Blindish Latina, follow her at Blindish Latina and at Explore Equity on Instagram to connect to Catarina's wide breadth of work. And you can also find her on LinkedIn. I will add her details in the chat. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Catarina, who's going to give us a very enlightening talk for about the next 30 minutes or so. And then we will open it up to your questions, which you will be able to pose either directly by unmuting or by posting in the chat. Until then, and while Catarina is speaking, I will ask that you mute yourself so that we can give her our full attention without distraction. Thank you so much, and welcome, Catarina.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure anytime that I get to come back to CUNY SPH and be a part of this community again. I have very fond memories of my time there and how supportive the professors and the staff were. It was a really formative experience for me. So today, I'm honored to be your speaker for this International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And I'm going to be talking to you about my journey with disability. I'm going to be sharing about the journey that I've been on from denial to acceptance of my disability. And what was that like? I'm also going to be talking about the importance of self-advocacy, which is a really important theme. And I'll share some practical strategies for how you can practice self-advocacy in your own life. Now, if you are not a person with a disability, it's great that you're here. You're going to grow in your awareness. And I'm also going to share some tips on how to be a better ally, which is really important, and we need our allies. So what is my personal journey with disability, and how do I identify? So I am Latina, I am Cuban and Puerto Rican, and my disability is a condition called Usher syndrome. Usher syndrome is a combination of vision and hearing loss. So I wear hearing aids, not sure if you can see them. And I also have a reduced visual field. The vision loss that I have is progressive and does continue and change over time, while my hearing loss is expected to remain mostly stable. And I've actually worn hearing aids from a very young age. I was 3 or 4 years old when I first started wearing hearing aids. My parents noticed that I had a hard time hearing them when I was far away. And my first year of school, I was in special education. At that time, I remember the hearing aids were almost like a Walkman. I had a big pack on my waist, and it connected to the hearing aids that were in my ears. And I had a great time in kindergarten. It was great. And then after that, I was mainstream. I continued to, and if you're not familiar with that term, mainstream means that you're not in special education anymore. You are in a regular classroom, but you may continue to receive some support according to an IEP or an individualized education plan. So on my IEP was speech therapy. So I would be pulled out every so often. It was like once a week, or I would receive speech therapy. But otherwise, I was in the regular classroom. And I adjusted. I adjusted to this very well. I adapted to my disability. If you speak to anybody with a hearing disability, they are masters at lip reading. We have to become masters at lip reading. So I feel very confident about my disability and my ability to handle it. But then I was hit with some very unexpected news. When I was 17, and in the summer, right before I was going off to college, my mother took me to an appointment, I remember at Johns Hopkins at their eye institute, and they diagnosed me with Usher syndrome. I had noticed some problems with seeing at night, and I had noticed a big difference between what I could see and what my friends could see. When I was at karate camp, everybody ran outside, and this was in nature, so there wasn't any light. And I noticed that they ran outside and they ran right into the darkness. And as soon as I got outside of the cabin, I couldn't move because I couldn't see. And that was very alarming. So this is what led to me getting tested and seeing like what was up with my eyes. And so Usher syndrome now added another layer to my life. I had an eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa, and it explained my hearing loss. We had no knowledge of why did I have this hearing loss, but now there was an explanation. And it was a whole nother set of challenges. So retinitis pigmentosa meant that my retina was deteriorating, and basically your vision gets worse over time. You have night blindness, and you have a loss of peripheral vision. Right now, what my vision is like a box like this. So if I get very close to something, I only see exactly that. If I'm far away from something, now I have the benefit of perspective. So with my little box, it widens and I can see that better. When I was diagnosed, I remember looking at my parents and feeling like I had to be strong for them because it was crushing. it was really hard to see their reaction. And I remember my mother jumping into action after the shock to think about what could she do, and looking for cures, looking for options. We went to Cuba to meet with a medicine man, to meet with doctors in Cuba, because they said they cured my condition, but it's a very invasive treatment that they have, and you have to return every year to a Cuban hospital for 2 weeks. So we didn't move forward with that. But I always have felt like it was, and in that moment, it felt like a tragedy. And it felt like this terrible thing had happened to me, especially as a young woman going off to college and being very excited about the next adventure in my life. So instead of, being very able to enjoy that, I remember my first week at college when I got to the Duke campus, I saw that all of my peers, not all of them, but a lot of them were having a great time. They were finally in college, they were partying, and I looked around and I said, wow, I don't know anybody here. No one is going to look out for me. I have to keep all my faculties about me. So I did not drink all 4 years that I was in college. I wanted to be sure that I did not impair myself any further. And that's the kind of adaptation that worked for me in order to feel like I was going to be okay. One challenge that I experienced a lot was, do I want to talk about my disability? Do I want to share? It's not always easy to talk about it. In the beginning, I found it very hard to talk about my disability. And I remember I would always say this one line. I would always tell people, I'm going blind, and just lay that line out there. And then I would cry. It was very emotional. And it felt like a big loss. It felt like a big loss in my life. So I had to go through that period of grieving the loss before I could move into acceptance. And that took a long time. There are services out there for people with vision loss. And I remember that when I looked back and I said, how long did it take me to go for those services and the training? And it was 8 to 9 years after my diagnosis. And that surprised me. I also resisted using a blind cane. For a while, I was very focused on passing, existing in the world, and not tipping anybody off to the fact that I have a disability. And this looks differently for vision versus hearing. Imagine that I'm at a networking event and someone is trying to shake my hand and telling me their name. I've never met them before. In order for me to see better, I have to lean back, I have to look for the hand. So maybe I've got the handshake, but I did not get the name. So sometimes you smile and nod and just keep it going. That's why any event that I host, I always have name tags, because it's much easier for me. That's a little accommodation that I do. But I was focused on tapping for a long time. And that leads to problems because people don't know you. And unfortunately, if you're someone that they're speaking to and you don't hear them or you don't see them, people will make assumptions that you're ignoring them or that you're rude, and it can lead to some misunderstandings. So I had to become ready to start sharing more openly, and I was seeing the issues. One reason that it could have been very hard to accept my disability is because of a concept called ableism. If you have heard of ableism, let me know in the chat. I want to know if you've heard of it, if it's something completely new to you, and I will explain what is ableism. Ableism is the discrimination and social prejudice against persons with disabilities, based on the belief that typical abilities or bodies are superior. Just like any other ism, it's very damaging. It's very damaging. And one thing that happens alongside with ableism being present in our society, us seeing able-bodied people featured and prized and praised in the media, in all the images and everything that we consume, is that as a person with a disability, you are then affected by internalized ableism. And just like everybody else, we exist in the same society. We are receiving the same messages. So it's natural to think that I would start to have, you kind of unconsciously have it within you, that you are other, you're not desirable and not valued. You see that you're not valued in society. So it takes a lot of work to counteract that feeling. One feeling that I've heard many people with disabilities say is that they don't want to be a burden, or they have felt like a burden. And that feeling can cause someone not to speak up, not to ask for what they need, like asking someone to repeat themselves or to provide closed captions in a meeting. But then what happens is the world loses you. The world loses what you have to offer. And you hold yourself back from actualizing your fullest self and everything that you want to do. So a big turning point in my disability journey was when I started using a blind cane. I think this really helps with my self-acceptance, because once you have a blind cane, you can't pass anymore. It's a very visible indicator of disability. As a person living in New York City, I was very used to being anonymous, walking around, no one is looking at you, you're just going and doing your daily life. But once I take the blind cane out, everyone is looking at me. And it brought up so many things. I remember that I first received blind cane training in my neighborhood. I wasn't ready for it. My trainer sprung it on me and was like, we're gonna practice. And I was so concerned about people seeing me from the community where I live. And now it seems strange to me, but in that moment, it was very real. I was very concerned about people seeing me. I wasn't ready to use the cane. I think it was 2 years later that I started using the cane, and I had to actually get retrained because I forgot everything. But I had my trainer meet me by my job. It was baby steps. So using the cane, one thing that would happen is that I started to feel like I had to conform to people's ideas of what a blind person does. Most people don't know that blindness is a spectrum, and that many people that have vision loss still have vision that they can use. So using a blind cane to get onto the subway, I love it. People move out of the way. They're so much nicer. And it's much easier to walk around like Times Square. And once I would get on the subway and sit on the car, I would take out my cell phone and start texting. And at the beginning, I was very anxious or self-conscious about that. I have gotten questions. I've definitely gotten looks. And eventually, I had to tell myself, it doesn't matter what other people think. I cannot address everybody's questions. I'm not going to speak to them individually. And I have to get over it. Because if I don't use my vision that I have, I'm not being safe. I need to cross the street and look both ways. I cannot just look straight ahead because I think people are gonna be wondering about me. So once I really got over it and stopped caring about people's misperceptions and their assumptions, I realized this is actually a very empowering thing. If somebody does see me using a blind cane and then using a phone, they're gonna perhaps grow in their awareness or start questioning, what's going on there? Maybe they'll learn something. And I have to exist in the world as me. And now I don't even tell people that I'm gonna come with a blind cane. Like if I have a new friend or a meeting, I just come in there, I have my cane, I put it away, I say, hi, nice to meet you. If they ask me a question, I answer. And I think that is a very empowering place to be in because it's part of me. My disability is a part of me, but it's not who I am. It's not the totality of who I am. I have so much more. So in the past, by not asking for help, I was kind of in a space of denial. And now, moving into a space of acceptance and self-empowerment, I really feel like I honed in on self-advocacy. I became much more comfortable with telling people that I had a disability. And I changed the language. Remember that earlier I said that I would always say, I'm going blind. I stopped doing that. What I do now is I focus on what is relevant to the current moment. What do they need to know? And what do I need help with? How can they help me? For example, if I'm at a restaurant and I walk into the restaurant, a lot of times I don't know what the layout of the restaurant is, for example. I can ask somebody and I can say, I don't see well in new spaces. Could I hold your arm and could you show me where the bathroom is? That's all they need to know. There's nothing else that they need to know. So being able to give quick information, if I go to a fitness class in pre-COVID times, I would say, I need to be far away from you because I have a vision problem when you're demonstrating things. So they wouldn't come right next to me and like demonstrate. I can't see that. I'm not going to do well. So these are just practical things that I encourage anybody with a disability to think about these kinds of messages. What does somebody need to know? What's relevant in that moment? And how to make it very simple. Very simple language is totally fine. Not everybody, if I was to start with, I have Usher syndrome. Usher syndrome is this. People are not going to know what I'm seeing and what my experience is like. No one is inside of me. No one sees what I see. Only I do. So I focus on the moment and what they can do for me right then, whether it's help me across the street or if they're pointing at something, explaining to them, okay, you're pointing, I'm going to follow your arm with my hand and then look exactly there. You know, that's another thing, that adaptation that becomes a normal part of my life. Another thing that I want to highlight is starting Blindish Latina, because it requires me to talk about my disability publicly. I remember that my mother, many years ago, I started a very small blog that not many people read, but it was the first time I started talking about my disability online. And my mother said to me, you should be very careful. What if a future employer sees your blog and discriminates against you? And it does happen. This employer discrimination is very real. But I decided that it wasn't going to stop me from sharing my story because I wouldn't want to work for any employer like that. So I did move past that kind of fear, but I know it's a real fear that is out there and it's based on real challenges that are faced by people with disabilities who are underemployed and often have a hard time getting a job. So talking about starting Blindish Latina and really being very open and educating has been a very empowering experience. And my friends and family and people have shared with me that they are learning. They are learning from that platform, and that's my goal. Because we are in a very special situation with the global pandemic, I want to speak a little bit about COVID-19 and the current context. And what does it mean for people with disabilities? Just a little bit. To give you some awareness of how has COVID-19 impacted me. People wearing masks all the time have made it difficult to understand speech because now I can no longer read lips. I know that many people struggle to hear and understand others with masks. So one great innovation is the mask with the clear panel, so you can still see people's mouths. Another great innovation is any app that does live automatic captioning or transcription of what people are saying. So I have an app called Ava that I can use in a live situation. And I did use it when I went to the dentist, and it was very helpful. So masks are a big challenge. For me personally, social distancing was also a big challenge, especially in New York City. When I'm using my blind cane, my independence increases. I have felt like I can go anywhere by myself. If I need help, it will be offered. I can find it. I don't have to concentrate as hard walking around. Now I feel less independent. I feel concerned about, I don't have an ability to look all around me and make sure that I am 6 feet away from everybody. It's not possible. So during the pandemic, I felt like I regressed in my independence. I relied a lot on my partner to take me outside for a walk. And that's a tough feeling, to feel like you're going backwards. So I'm always looking for ways to adapt, but this is a very real challenge. If you are not aware, many people with disabilities are more at risk for COVID-19 for many reasons, depending on their conditions. And people with chronic illnesses are also part of the category of people with disabilities, in case you were not aware of that. Many people have had to deal with lack of care, for example, if they require regular care or equipment, or just social isolation and mental health issues, just like the rest of our population. One point that I've heard people talk about as well is the issue of remote work. Remote work is something that people with disabilities have been fighting for and asking for, many of them for a long time. And companies have put up barriers and have not made it possible. But all of a sudden now, everybody got to work remotely. And companies saw, oh, we can do this. People, we can trust our workers. We have to. They were forced to. But I think for many people who have been advocating for this and struggling to get this accommodation, it's frustrating to see that this is what it took. And it took everybody benefiting from it in order for it to be a change in our culture. Even with remote work now being a more universal experience, online meetings are not always accessible, especially when there's not closed captioning or for people who use ASL, having access to interpreters. There's still a lot of space to make online meetings the best and most accessible possible. Now that I've spoken a little bit about coronavirus and given you what are some things to think about in the current context, we're going to focus on key recommendations if you are a person with a disability, how you can engage in more self-advocacy and why it's so important. And then I will outline some recommendations for allies as well. In order to be your best advocate, you have to start with self-acceptance. So if you have a disability and you have not accepted it, it's going to be hard for you to step into your fullest power. What I encourage you to do is think of it as a muscle. Self-advocacy is a muscle that you must strengthen. And each time that you speak up, and each time that you gather a little bit of courage and overcome your fear, you will get stronger, you'll get more comfortable, and it will become more natural. So if you go to the gym, you wouldn't lift 100 pounds on the first try. Go step by step. Take it little by little and celebrate the small wins. You might have a knot in your throat before speaking up, but push through. When you want to reframe internally your disability, instead of thinking of it as a terrible thing, think of what the positives are. What has it done for you? What has it taught you? What has it made you more aware of? How can it be your superpower? What have you been more committed to doing because of it? One thing for me is that I have pushed myself to travel because I wanted to see as much as I could with the vision that I have right now. So I've been able to travel many places, and that's been an internal drive related to my disability. When you are self-advocating, I recommend not to overshare, because as we know, people don't have the best memories. Focus on your key messages, focus on what exactly you want them to know. So back to what I was sharing earlier, don't worry about naming your condition. Tell them what they need to know at that moment. So for example, I wear hearing aids and I benefit from captions. Can we use Google Meet for our meeting? I don't see well at night. Can I hold your arm? Like, just make it easy for people. And I think you'll have a better experience, because sometimes when I think that, and I don't know what it's like to be fully able-bodied, I think that a lot of times, from my analysis, people don't know what to do, and it makes them awkward and almost back away. So by giving someone something to do and giving them a little bit of explanation of what's going on with you, I think it's a more inviting and it's better outcome for both parties. Those are my recommendations for people with disabilities. If you are an ally, I encourage you to step into a role of an active ally. Don't be an ally that just talks about it and doesn't do anything. Each person has a sphere of influence, whether you are able to influence something at your job or in your church or in your building. I actually have a story about this that I did not include, but in my building, there was a set of steps that you have to go down in order to access the door. It's like a courtyard, so there are 8 steps. The bar that you hold onto was not ergonomically aligned. It was like really high and kind of hard to grab. So also the steps are all the same color. So it's very hard for somebody who has a vision problem to look down at the stairs and identify each one. So I asked my building, hey, can you paint lines on the stairs at the end so that we can identify better each one? Not just for me, but for elderly people, people, just everybody. Everybody can benefit. It's not just for me, but I want to make you aware. And I also think the rail is not good. So I didn't have to do that much. I really just spoke up. I sent an email. I followed up on it once, I think, and they did it. And now there are hundreds of people, because the courtyard has 4 buildings that now can benefit from that accessible. There's now a center rail And the paint is all the steps. So you never know what your small voice or your question can do. You never know what allies you are going to find. So I encourage you to speak up. Even if you don't know what the solution is, try to speak up and see what can be done. If you are an ally, listen to people with disabilities. Commit to being that active ally. Consider small actions that you can take in situations. For example, you could offer to take notes in a meeting. You could advocate for a meeting to be held on an accessible platform that provides closed captions. If you're leading a meeting, you could restate and repeat the key points and make sure they're displayed in multiple ways. And you can create a safe space for people to ask for accommodation so that you can help everybody with whatever they may need. If you're a decision maker, make sure that you're honoring the expertise of the disability community and uplifting their voices. I also encourage everybody who wants to be an ally to commit themselves to learning. It's great to talk to people with disabilities, to listen to them, to ask them questions, but you also should take on ownership of your own education, looking for resources that are already being shared. For example, someone can be on my Blindish Latina page and learn without causing an undue burden on me, without asking me to educate them. This is something I'm already putting out there. There are many people with disabilities who are all over Instagram. They're making videos, they have podcasts, they're sharing the most incredible and interesting stuff, and it's already out there to take a listen, to look at, and to learn. So I hope that you've enjoyed this time with me here today, learning about my journey from denial to acceptance of my disability, and talking about self-advocacy and being a strong ally. Remember that you matter, you are worthy, and your stories matter. So I hope that you'll keep in touch with me. I look forward to your questions. I want to see questions, comments, reactions, all of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catarina, for your wonderful.
Thank you
for informing us. Just before we open to questions, I am going to share some information that I want to make available in case some folks decide to leave us early. So very quickly, I just wanted to call your attention to some opportunities or actions that you can take today. In other words, stepping into your role as allies or as self-advocating people with disabilities. There are some actions related to what we refer to as disability justice. So there's a number you can call. It's a national call-in day today that is being sponsored by advocates. So if you call this number and you tell our United States Congress to support some key disability justice legislation, for example, passing the Medicare for All Act or the Empower Care Act, and I'll put each of these links in the chat during the Q&A, and also the Disability Integration Act to ensure disabled people can live in their homes and not in institutions. And finally, ratifying the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Treaty, which has yet to be done by the United States, which limits discrimination against disabled people in healthcare. So these are just some of the things that you can do. And again, I will put each of these, including the phone number, in the chat in a moment. Next slide, please, John. And also, if you are a student with the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health, these are our resources for you. through the Office of Accessibility Services, which provides appropriate and reasonable accommodations to students with disabilities as mandated by the American with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, and Sections 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. You can schedule an appointment with our disability coordinator, Jeanette Rodriguez, who is here with us, and her office has co-sponsored this event. So you can email her, and if you have any general questions, you can also contact her through the general email for the Office of Accessibility Services. So now the floor is open, and I thank you, John. Don't leave. I just wanted to squeeze that in because sometimes people leave a little early. So with that, I just wanted to, you can unmute yourself and ask a question directly, or you can also choose to type it directly into the chat and I will read it. I see a lot of praise and thank yous. We appreciate your gratitude. Are there any questions? Please unmute if you're going to ask directly.
Hi, Catarina. This is Jeanette. Can you hear me? I wanted to, well, thank you so much for such a heartfelt talk. I'm wondering, in thinking about technology, is there, what's new now? Is there some new technology that you did not have, let's say, when you were at Duke, or even with CUNY? Is there technology that you did not have that you have now that has helped in your everyday life?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jeanette, for the question and for your continuous support. It's amazing to know that I was there when you started. I believe I was there when you started at CUNY. Yes, there is technology that has changed. One of the biggest things that has changed is with hearing aids. If for people who don't wear hearing aids, maybe you're not aware of this, but a few things have changed in hearing aids. You can now have Bluetooth enabled hearing aids, which can connect to your phone. And basically I have an app that I can change my program, I can up my volume, and I can do a lot of things with my hearing aids right from my phone. The biggest way that changed my life was that the sound quality is far superior. Because imagine, the hearing aid is a fancy speaker. If I'm transmitting sound out of my laptop, then it has to go inputted in, like, from the speaker of my hearing aid, then it's in my ear. There's a gap in how high that quality can be. But with Bluetooth directly to my phone, it feels like it's in my ears. I've never been able to wear headphones before because I have the hearing aids in my ears. I have to wear really big ones if I do wear them. But this just changed everything. Phone calls. I used to avoid phone calls. And I found, like, wow, I can talk on the phone. And this is my setup. I have my tripod. This is not really tech, but I tell everybody, I'm such an evangelist of this. You know, I just have it on the tripod all the time. If I have a call, like right now, the sound is coming through my phone. You all are through my phone. And then I'm just speaking right here into the speaker. So that changed my life. When I first got these hearing aids, this was the only company on the market doing it, but now it's become the industry standard and many more hearing aids have it. So that's great for people. And the other thing that's now happening with hearing aids is that they have rechargeable batteries. So carrying around battery packs, I had to change my battery before the call. There are pros and cons, because if you can just carry that and change your battery, it's very easy to do. But if you have to recharge your battery pack, then being at a bar looking for a plug, I can't imagine. I don't have rechargeable yet. But I will say one caveat about hearing aids. Most health insurance plans do not cover hearing aids, and it's a great injustice because hearing loss is so common. So it's really a problem. That is really a problem, the affordability. And there are 4 tiers of levels, like from premium to basic. So it's now creating a system where not everybody has equity. So that is one thing that I think has really changed things for me. And I have to give it up to AI generated closed captioning. That was not around when, you know, I was in school or even at CUNY. So having a meeting like this where there are closed captions, I have them at work through Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, free and accessible to everybody. That's a game changer to really have accessibility of online events and meetings and just full participation from everybody. So those have made big, big changes for me, and those are tech advancements. There are other things, of course, but I think those are pretty significant.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Hi, Catarina. Thank you for sharing with us. And I appreciate all of your comments and insights and can relate to many of your experiences. Though my disabilities are invisible and it has a lot of overlapping experiences, but a lot of significant differences that make it difficult to use some of your advice or would be less effective. And some of my frustrations are that I didn't have these diagnoses growing up. So as they're more recent, I've had to try to adjust not only to the process of self-acceptance, but also how to deal socially and professionally, academically, etc. And that's been hard to navigate. I've declared myself, openly and spoken in classes and in papers and met with faculty to very mixed success and experiences. But the whole issue of most people with invisible disabilities, especially in academia, the studies show don't want to go public and not even privately with students. So there's no mentorship, and the culture for acceptance and for accommodations is not very good. So there's a lot of pushback. They do want to ask questions of what your conditions are, and they want to feel that they can judge you often because they have opinions about invisible disabilities, mental health, and pain, and other kinds of things. So I'm trying to, give you a summary and get to the point of saying, I have been thinking about my future in academia and or professionally, and there's a lot of questions I have of some of the issues you mentioned, and without the mentorship, sometimes it just feels overwhelmingly difficult to imagine some of the opportunities being available, and it can be a lonely and sad place to be stuck thinking about that. So I'll leave it for there with that for now.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think there's so much that I want to respond there. And at first I want to say that you called out something very important. I only know my own experience. So I can only be an expert on my journey and what I've experienced. I cannot speak for anybody else. And especially within the disability community, there is a lot of variance. There's so many different conditions and situations. So I think I just want to say that I hear you first and foremost. And that's very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to go through, especially like you said, it's not something that you've grown up with. So you've had to deal with a lot in a compressed amount of time. One of the biggest things that has helped me is knowing other people with my condition. And I think that has, at different points in my life, I used it different ways, or it helped me in different ways. In the beginning, I knew some people with my condition, and they were more like role models to me. Like, oh, they're really cool. Like, I just want to ask them questions. And then further down the line, like, I'm talking about different things with them and learning about tools, learning about solutions. There's a lot of information sharing. So if you're not already plugged into a community, whether that's online or whatever is the right fit for you, I highly encourage it. I think that's helped me a lot. And it hasn't always been like one person or one community. And the other thing that I just will say is that obviously there's a lot of lack of awareness and judgment in our society towards people with disabilities. And I hope that the work that I'm doing and that many others are doing can help to change that. If you do have a particular job that you are applying for and you're New York based, I highly recommend Disability Rights New York. They are lawyers who have federal grant money to help people, so they will not charge you. And you can consult with them and ask questions. They can help with the interview process, for example, and navigating it. And they'll give you very concrete advice and helpful advice. So I found them to be very helpful. I had to navigate an accommodations related discussion at my work, and they were very helpful. So I can put their name in the chat. I'm happy to talk more if you think it would be beneficial and or make any introductions for you. I don't want you to feel alone.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I have tried but not been successful in finding a community. Is a short answer for you. If we speak privately one day, I can share more. But at school, there has certainly not been a community, or I haven't seen an entry point to become a part of one. I did want to specify, though, that a lot of the issues are structural. As you pointed out, how COVID has now made all of a sudden a major ask more likely, and perhaps staying potentially around in society as a major transformation. And I have similar structural types of issues, some specifically in academia, that would be my concerns.
And I'll just add that, I hear you also, and it's something that Jeanette and I are committed to doing better at our own institution. And we feel we have a long way to go, but we are taking those baby steps and continually learning.
Hi, this is Catarina. Thank you again for sharing your story and sharing the tips and best practices. In terms of, I guess, being in a position where, let's say, you are leading teams or managing or coming into a new workspace, as you said, when it comes to disabilities, I mean, there's a wide range, and some are seen, some are visible, and some are invisible. Any recommendations on how to create a space where those with particularly an invisible disability feel comfortable sharing? Or is there a way to ask in a way where it comes across as attempting to learn and understand in order to make accommodations if needed? I hope that's sort of clear what I'm trying to ask, but it's really about trying to maintain an inclusive group without being too intrusive or coming across as trying to judge or change because of someone's visible or invisible disability.
Thank you for this question. First of all, you have great intentions. So that's number one. Great. I will share some quick tips. I am mindful of the time. I will say that you want to create an inclusive culture as a manager, that no matter what anybody is dealing with, whether they're having a temporary difficulty within their family, for example, that is affecting their work, or whether they have a disability that they have every day and is ever present. Creating an inclusive culture will help everybody be supported. And it's not always about accommodations. That's actually the legal minimum, is to offer accommodations when someone requests them. So, but first things first, I would say be very familiar with the accommodations process, how to do it at your place of employment, so that if someone does come to you, you know the process in and out, and you're able to help them to quickly get the accommodations. As I personally had to do a lot of advocacy for many months just to get a pair of headphones that would work with my office phone. It was a lot. So, and just think about how you can become an expert in that process. I would also say that you always, as far as asking people to disclose, you definitely don't want to have people disclosing things they're not ready to. But anytime that you're hosting a meeting, you could ask open-ended questions like, what accommodations do you need? Or let me know how I can make this meeting more inclusive for you. Definitely also read up on best practices and keep trying them out. I think multiple ways of sharing information, making concrete next steps that are shared out and everybody can access after a meeting is always a good practice. Ask the people that you're managing how you can be more inclusive, and they don't have to let you know their disability if it's not necessary, but if you're just asking how you can be more inclusive in general, that you want to have a more inclusive culture, perhaps creating an anonymous way for people to share their feedback might be a way to get started.
Great, thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Joanne. When you're talking about, people, I'm from the UK, people meeting up together, because I'm a student at London Met at the moment. And so I try to form groups where people meet up. And what I found is that people with invisible disabilities they want to maintain their confidentiality, and for that reason find it really difficult to meet up in groups. And I would probably even like to sort of talk to other people who have had this problem, so that we could probably find ways that people can meet up and connect with each other without losing any of their confidentiality, whether it's in a workplace, college, university, or whatever. Thanks.
Thank you for that. That's something I'm hearing more of and would like to explore. And certainly, for people to, submit their concerns confidentially, anonymously even, but also to find ways to get together. Yeah.
I mean, I have been able to help people in that I have a visible disability, so people with invisibility who aren't visibly disabled usually sometimes come up to me as I'm a representative and ask me to advocate for them. But I like the talk that you gave this evening, because I'm even thinking maybe I should have something internet based to help people advocate more for themselves in this way. So I've liked what I've heard this evening.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I think that when you do something that shares stories and it is online, you don't know who you're helping. You can have an impact that you're not even aware of. I have a friend who was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 30, and she's a woman. And it sparked a whole journey for her to learn about why was she diagnosed so late? What did people miss? And she found that there were a whole community of women just like her that wanted to learn more about ADHD, and she formed that community online. and featured stories, and it's been very powerful. So I think that was a great way for her. People don't have to identify or self-identify in order to look at a website or hear stories and benefit from it. So I'll just drop the name in the chat. So thank you for being here and for sharing your comment. It's really great to learn your perspective.
Well, we are at our time, and I just want to thank everyone and Catarina for your wonderful talk. So very enlightening, as I knew it would be, but even more so than I expected. I always love hearing you share, and ever since you were a student of mine, and I've been a student of yours. And all of you who joined us, especially from as far as away as the UK, we're very appreciative of you taking the time to be with us for this hour. And I will be sharing this recording with all who RSVP'd, even those who weren't able to join us. We've left information in the chat for you to reach out to Catarina directly, to follow her, to be in touch, learn more with and from her. And hopefully you will all find a richer, more inclusive community that we all can be a part of. And again, thank you for coming. I appreciate you all. Take good care. Be safe.
Thank you.